Dive back into the neon pulse of a world where every heartbeat is a countdown to the next big revelation. We capture the rhythm of the city and the soul of the survivor in high definition. Hit subscribe now and keep your finger on the pulse of storytelling.
Take the ring, I said. Take the deposit. Take everything you've always taken. I didn't say it out loud, of course. I never did. That was the thing about growing up in my family. You learned very early that the words in your head and the words that came out of your mouth were two completely different languages. My brother had always been the one who got the words. The good words, I mean. That he's so driven and he just needs a little support right now. And you understand, don't you, sweetheart, because you're the strong one. I got the adjectives that dressed up as compliments, but were really just permission slips for other people to take more. Strong, dependable, practical. They called me practical the way you call a Honda Civic practical. Reliable. Yes, but nothing you'd brag about at dinner. I was 28 when I bought the condo. I want you to understand what that meant. I had been working since I was 16, hostessing at a diner, then waitressing, then front desk at a hotel while I finished my degree at night. I had a spreadsheet I'd been updating since I was 22. Column A was my income. Column B was rent. Column C was savings. Column D was labeled someday. I moved things from column D to column C every single month for 6 years. No vacations, no designer anything. A Costco membership I shared with a coworker, store brand everything. The condo was in a building 12 minutes from my office. 2 bedrooms, south-facing. The kind of morning light that makes you want to drink coffee slowly. I cried in the parking lot after I signed the papers, not sad crying, the other kind. My brother called that night to congratulate me. He sounded genuinely happy, which surprised me, and then he said, "You know, I've been thinking about what you said last Easter, about wanting to invest in real estate. And I just want you to know I think this is really smart." And I realized he hadn't remembered what I'd actually said at Easter, which was that I was close to my down payment. He'd remembered it the way he remembered most things about me. Vaguely, from a distance, like I was a news story he'd half heard on the radio. "Thanks," I said. "I'm really excited." "You should be," he said, and then he said, "Hey, so listen. And you can absolutely say no to this, no pressure at all. But Talia and I are going through a rough patch, and she's been staying at her sister's, and my lease is actually up in 2 weeks, and I was wondering if maybe—" I looked at my brand new keys sitting on my brand new kitchen counter. "Just for a month," he said. 2 at the most. I'll pay rent. Whatever you think is fair. I want to be honest about this part." I said yes because my mother would have called within 48 hours if I hadn't, not to yell. My mother didn't yell. She employed something more efficient. A soft, tired voice that made you feel like your unwillingness to sacrifice was physically exhausting her. "He just needs to get back on his feet," she would have said. "You know how sensitive he is. You know how hard this has been for him." And then the silence that meant, "And you, with your paid-off condo and your spreadsheets and your practicality, you could give him this one thing." I said yes. 2 months. I set a specific end date, I wrote it down, I gave him a copy. His name was not on the lease. That part matters. He moved in with 3 duffel bags and a flat-screen TV, and a coffee maker that was nicer than mine. Within a week he had also moved in his golf clubs, a rowing machines that he described as just temporary, a second flat screen for the guest room, a mini fridge he'd grabbed from storage, and Talia, who had apparently resolved the rough patch. I want to be fair. Talia was not unkind to me. She was just thoroughly convinced, in that way some people are, that whatever space she occupied was space that had always been waiting for her. She rearranged my kitchen. Not maliciously. She just had a system, and my system was apparently not a system. It was just stuff in places. She bought new dish towels because mine were a little tired. She asked me, once, with genuine curiosity, why I kept my coffee in the cabinet instead of on the counter, and when I said, because that's where it fits, she looked at me with the expression of someone who has found a very confused animal and said, "Oh, we can fix that." The end date I'd written down came and went. My brother sat across from me at my own kitchen table. Talia's dish towels folded on the oven handle behind him, and explained that they'd been looking at apartments, but the market was brutal right now. And he'd actually been offered a new position that he was thinking about turning down because of the commute, and he and Talia were also talking about maybe just buying instead of renting, and it might make more financial sense to just wait and save rather than throw money at a rental, which meant, if I could just— "How long?" I said. 3 more months, he said. 4 max, and you'll pay rent. After he paid for 6 weeks. Then his new position fell through and things were tight, and could I maybe just cover it for now and he'd pay me back once he was settled. My mother called that week, unsolicited, to mention that my brother was going through a really difficult time with the job situation, and she just wanted to make sure I was being supportive. I asked her what supportive meant in this context, and she said, "You know what I mean," which was her way of saying she didn't want to have to spell it out, because spelling it out would require her to look directly at what she was asking. I started keeping records. Not because I was planning anything, just because I'd grown up in a family where facts had a way of getting soft around the edges, where that never happened and that's not how I remember it were deployed. With the ease of people who had never needed to verify their own memories. I had learned to be the archivist of my own life. I kept every text, every Venmo request I sent that he left unopened, every email where I confirmed a deadline in writing and he replied with a thumbs up emoji. I built a folder, I named it paperwork. I did not tell anyone about it. 6 months after his move-in date, I told him I needed a definitive timeline. You're stressing me out, he said. I need a date, I said. He gave me one, he did not meet it. He gave me another one, he did not meet that one either. Talia started calling the second bedroom the office, even though there was no desk in it, only the rowing machine and 3 boxes of her candles from an Etsy shop she had been about to launch for the better part of a year. I started looking at my options. I wasn't trying to be clever. I wasn't planning a dramatic moment. I was just tired. The specific exhaustion of someone who has spent years being the practical one, the responsible one, the one who handles it and has finally started to notice that none of the handling ever seems to go in any direction except toward other people's comfort and away from her own. I called my landlord, the management company technically, and asked a very simple question. What was the process if I needed to formally reclaim my unit from an occupant who was not on the lease and had overstayed a verbal agreement? The answer was cleaner than I expected. A formal written notice, a specific number of days required by state law. Delivered in writing, certified mail, documented. I asked about the guest policy in my lease, which I had read 3 times before signing and twice since, because I am the kind of person who reads leases. The policy was clear. Guests could stay up to 30 days. After that, they were required to be added to the lease. Or vacate. He had been there for 7 months. I did not tell my brother what I'd learned. I did not tell my mother. I called a tenants' rights attorney, on my side as the leaseholder, and had a 45-minute consultation that cost me $150. And at the end of it I had a very clear picture of exactly where I stood, and exactly what I could do, and exactly how long it would take. I sat with that picture for 2 weeks. It wasn't that I felt guilty. It was more that I kept waiting for myself to feel guilty. And I didn't, and the not feeling guilty felt so unfamiliar that I kept checking for it, the way you check a pocket for your phone. That little moment of patting yourself down, making sure you haven't lost something, but I hadn't lost it, I just didn't have it. And after a while I understood that what I'd been calling guilt all these years was something else. It was the feeling of being in trouble with people whose approval I had long since learned to collect like a tax. I was done paying that tax. I sent the formal notice on a Tuesday. Certified mail to my own address, return receipt requested, because the attorney had told me to do it that way, and I had paid $150 for that advice, and I was going to follow it exactly. I also hand-delivered a copy, slid it under the guest room door at 9 in the morning, while my brother and Talia were both home. I heard them in there, talking, quiet at first, then not. My brother came out of the room 40 minutes later with the paper in his hand, and a look on his face that I had seen before. At 13 when he'd crashed my parents' car, and needed someone to be more upset than him, so he could be the reasonable one, and at 20 when he'd borrowed money from our grandmother, and needed someone to be the bad guy when she asked about it. What is this, he said. Not a question. A statement of disbelief that I had done a thing. It's a notice to vacate, I said. You have 30 days. You can't be serious. I've been serious for about 4 months, I said. I'm just now putting it in writing. He called our mother from the hallway. I didn't leave. I stood in my kitchen, with Talia's dish towels on the oven handle, and I listened because they were in my home and I was allowed to be in my own home. My mother arrived in 40 minutes. She didn't knock. She had a key, which my brother had apparently given her at some point, without mentioning it to me, which was its own piece of information I filed away for later. She stood in the middle of my living room and looked at me the way she used to look at me when I was a child, who had done something that required her to be very patient and very disappointed at the same time. This is your brother, she said. I know who he is, I said. He has nowhere to go. He's had 7 months to find somewhere to go. You're doing this because of money, she said. This is about money. It's about my home, I said, which I paid for, which his name is not on. My mother said things after that, a number of things. She said I was punishing my brother for her mistakes as a parent, which was a sentence I had never heard before, and found genuinely impressive in its architecture. She said I had always been the cold one. She said she didn't understand where this version of me had come from. She said that my father would be devastated. My father, who had been deceased for 3 years, and who, when he was alive, had called me his most reliable kid. A compliment I had always accepted with a small ache, because reliable felt like the thing you said about a person, when what you meant was that you didn't have to worry about them. I'll show you out, I said. When she left, I changed the lock codes. My brother and Talia were gone in 22 days. Not 30, 22. They found an apartment. Turns out, When you actually have a deadline that has consequences, the market is not that brutal. They didn't take Talia's dish towels. Whether that was an oversight or a statement, I still don't know. My mother did not call me for 11 days. When she did call, her opening was, "I hope you're happy." I thought about that for a second. "I am actually," I said. She said she had spoken to a family attorney. Her phrase, family attorney, like she was putting together a legal team, about whether what I'd done was even legal. I told her it was, in fact, legal, and that if she wanted documentation I had quite a bit of it. She said that wasn't what she meant. I told her I wasn't sure what she meant then. She said she meant that it wasn't right, even if it was legal, and that there was a difference. There is a difference, I agreed. But in this case, the legal thing and the right thing are the same thing. She didn't call again for another 3 weeks. Meanwhile, my brother made a choice. I think about this part a lot, actually. Not with regret, but with a kind of fascination. The way you study a pattern in hindsight and see exactly where it was going even when no one saw it at the time. He made a choice to be angry at me. That's the only way I can describe it. A choice, deliberate, maintained, curated. He posted something on social media. Not about me directly. About family members who prioritize property over people, which was visible to mutual relatives and high school friends. And my aunt in Phoenix, who called me to say she'd seen it, and didn't quite understand but wanted to. My aunt is a practical woman. She listened to me for about 8 minutes. Then she said, "So he was living there rent-free and you gave him 30 days notice and this is what happened?" "That's correct," I said. "Honey," she said, "he posted that publicly?" "He did." She was quiet for a moment. "Well," she said, "that's going to be awkward for him at Christmas." I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that surprises you by coming out. What happened next was not something I planned. My brother, in his anger, decided that the solution was to demonstrate to the family that he was the victim of my cruelty. He talked to everyone. The extended family, his friends, people from our childhood. He talked so much, and so specifically that the details of what had happened became widely known. Including, in those details, that he had lived rent-free in my condo for 7 months after his verbal agreement ended, and that I had given him 30 days notice, and that he had found an apartment in 22 days. People can do math. By Christmas, my aunt in Phoenix was not the only one who had thoughts. My cousin, who had always been closer to my brother, pulled me aside at my grandmother's house and said, low and without drama, he told me what happened. "You were more patient than I would have been." My grandmother, who is 81 and has opinions she no longer bothers to filter, said, at the dinner table, "I hear you finally put your foot down." With the tone of someone who had been waiting for that sentence for some time. My mother sat at the end of the table and said nothing. I watched her not saying anything. I had spent my whole life learning to read her silences. They had different registers, different temperatures. This one was new to me. It wasn't angry and it wasn't calculating. It was something closer to reckoning. She was at a table where the story had already spread to people she couldn't edit. And the story was, at its most basic level, just facts. Her son had taken advantage of her daughter's home. Her daughter had eventually said so in writing. That was the story, and it turned out that most people, given just the facts, arrived at the same place. After dinner, she found me in the kitchen doing dishes. Old habit, the practical one always does the dishes. And she stood next to me and didn't say anything for a minute. Then she said, "I know I wasn't fair to you. I kept washing the dish I was washing." "You don't have to say anything," she said. "I just needed to say that." I handed her a dish to dry. She took it. We stood there doing dishes for 10 minutes. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It wasn't resolution. It was more like the first honest conversation we'd had in years that didn't require me to translate anything. That didn't have a second language underneath it. She said something that was true. I didn't argue with it. We washed the dishes. Later that night, I drove home to my condo. South-facing, morning light. Coffee where I keep it. I made tea because it was late and tea sounded right. I sat on my couch in a quiet that was entirely mine. I wasn't cold. I wasn't punishing anyone. I wasn't the reliable one or the practical one or the strong one. I was just a woman in her own home, drinking her own tea, and for the first time in a long time, that was exactly enough.